I made the distinction that freedom is the menu. Liberty is what you actually order. Freedom is just a concept. Liberty is what you activate and you bring into your life.
Welcome to the High Voltage Business Builders, a show where we interview entrepreneurs growing and scaling their income through e-commerce and showing you the path to make your first or next million. Hey folks, welcome back. I have here again the master guru, sensei, Jesse Elder. I think I talked to one of your relatives earlier, John Elder, over at Black Label Podcast. No relation?
And no relation.
No relation. Well, I mean, how many elders are there in the world? As far as I'm concerned, there's only you.
There's more than there were 500 years ago.
That's also true. We are populating.
You're a hardy breed.
You are a hardy breed. Welcome back. This is the second edition, part two, whatever we want to call it, part two of our conversation, kind of extending on some of the things we started to unpack a little in the last call. I'm sure we could go on for hours about this, but we want to keep it around 2025 so people don't totally daze off on some of the concepts we're talking about, because in some minds, I know these are a bit radical as well as a bit, how do you say that the right way? How would we say that the right way, Jesse?
Slightly alien.
Slightly alien. There you go. That's a good word.
Slightly uncomfortable. But I found that it's uncomfortable for someone to the degree that they have either consciously or unconsciously given away their agency and made the decision that someone else knows better for them what's right for them. And, this is institutionalized. It happens in school. It happens in most of the major religions and most of the minor ones. It happens in social structures of relationships. Yep. So there's this whole, people are basically front loaded in the first developing years of their life to look to others for guidance, external authority on just this sort of global level, meaning everything in life, someone else knows something better. And so I found that these concepts there's no middle ground on these. Someone is either pretty opposed to it based on how far they are on the agency scale, giving up their agency to others. It has nothing to do with their intelligence. There's very intelligent people who believe that others know better for them or what's right for them. But the more that somebody does accept or is just open to taking more radical responsibility for their own life, the more these concepts seem to appeal. So I don't think there's any right or wrong. I think it just depends on if somebody wants to set the slider of agency in their life. If you want to move that slider all the way towards total responsibility, well, byproduct of that is total freedom. Freedom is the byproduct of responsibility. Where someone lacks responsibility, there's been a lack, or when someone lacks freedom, there's a corresponding lack of responsibility. And where somebody has tons of freedom, financially, time, creatively, emotionally, it's because they've taken a corresponding level of responsibility.
Well, it's two different paths. I mean, we're talking about the idea that in one path, you are taking ownership, therefore freedom is on your mind, and you're willing to accept the consequences of said freedom goals and getting out of a comfort zone that maybe feels a little bit more radical to you at this point. And then as the Constitution, again, is that institutional capital going the other direction, saying, you're taking my guardrails away. I don't know how to operate. This is not the freedom I asked for.
Right.
Which feels very much like chaos and slipping down a hill you don't control.
Disney, Netflix freedom I was watching on TV last night. And so that you bring up a great distinction. I really think there is a difference. Maybe they're two sides of the same coin between freedom and liberty. And I just gave a talk on Sunday. We've got a community that's growing rapidly here, which we'll talk a little bit about today. But I made the distinction that freedom is the menu. Liberty is what you actually order. Freedom is just a concept. Liberty is what you activate and you bring into your life. Somebody said, like an entrepreneur, many entrepreneurs are drawn to this idea of financial freedom. It's like, cool. Well, that's a great concept. What exactly does that mean? So, for my clients, for coaches, it's like, what does it look like? How will you know when you've activated it? So, I work with a lot of coaches. And so their goal is usually to get revenue between 40 and 100,000 per month at 90 to 95% net profit while keeping their leveraged delivery streamlined so that they're only delivering 8 to 12 hours a week, get their marketing done in another 8 to 12 hours a week, and have all the rest of their time free to live an actual life outside of business, funded by this high profit 40 to 100K per month business. Now we've gamified liberty. Now somebody can give themselves a score relative to that benchmark. And then we can just know exactly what the next step is to take. So to me, that's always just seemed the most logical thing to do, instead of this, whether it's waving a flag or a political sticker or putting a sign in your yard, I stand with Ukraine. I'm like, you're not standing with Ukraine. Ukraine is like thousands of miles away. You're here.
Right.
How are you
You're
standing with
virtuous.
Ukraine?
You're virtuous signaling that you're kind of just,
Yeah.
you're not,
Yeah.
unless you're planning on picking up a weapon and going over there, which
Right. Exactly.
I'm not planning on doing anytime soon. Then you are basically just following the mass is some sort
Exactly.
of indicator of, happiness, of an
Right.
indicator of liberation of some other party because there's some sort of entitlement behind it. I don't know, but it is that very slippery slope of this isn't the liberty that I wanted. And what am I actually liberating myself from? It's going to feel pretty scary at times if you're not making the choices.
Yes.
If again, we know this to be the case, if you've been in a job and you've been liberated from your job, all of a sudden it's going to be very scary. And that ain't the kind of freedom you were looking for, because then you're not working at all. And you're like, well, I had 40 hours. Now I'm working zero. That's
Right.
zero money too. So that's
Right.
not quite what I had in mind
Right.
for the
Well, and
picture.
you open up another great loop. That is where people get to find out how badly they want this thing that they've actually created. And
Yeah.
so,
Yes,
if
right.
you've got zero money coming in, then that presumably means you've got zero time sucked up by something, which
Yep.
means you've got all the time to get focused, to decide what you want, to find out who can help you get it, to relentlessly commit to training. And that's where fear is a powerful motivator. When I was a fighter, I never trained as hard as I did when I had a fight schedule. When I would hear from the promoter, hey man, we've got you slated to fight so-and-so, and it's, going to be a month from now. Oh man, that, like, your whole reality just starts to revolve around training, because
Yeah.
that a month from now, it's going to be a high stakes situation, no rules,
Yeah.
no time limit, no weight limit, no safety equipment. And you'll find out how good your training has been. And every
doubt.
training counts. I
No
think
doubt. It's a good analogy.
Dan Sullivan said there's no motivation like no alternative. And I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, no, actually back against the wall, right? Whether or not you're fight or flight. Clearly you're a fighter. And though we talk about the two differences, people who typically are entrepreneurial and are on that path of trajectory for freedom, time, sustainability, money, lifestyle, the goals that check the box, not always about the money, but sometimes it's about the emotional feeling, or the fighters in my
Yep.
mind. I see people fighting in other ways in their job, their life, their family, finances, sex, health, and wealth. And they don't understand those, they're fighting losing battles because they can't literally grab onto that. There's nothing tangible to hold on to in that place, right? They're grasping at straws, as the analogy goes.
Yeah.
But like, I understand that. I understand putting yourself against the wall. I've been there. I've had to reinvent myself a couple times, come from zero to, from nothing and up. It's the entrepreneurial roller coaster. We're literally playing Mexican trade dominoes with our family the other day. We had this little competition. It was like multiple families going, and we're all in here playing. It's all competitive and win, win, win. And I'm just like, a win, like, at all costs, right? So we had a 4-game series. I won 3 out of the 4 and lost the game. Tell me how that happens. You know what happened in the one game I lost? I crashed hard. I got more points on the board, which is not the case. You want to stay zero. I zeroed out 4 and I crushed the 4th one. So I went hard up and down and lost the entire game, even though I won 3 out of 4 of the hands. So this is how some of us play, because we know there are big rewards, but there's also big fails and there's big failures in the output of that. How does your group, and how are you wrestling with that where you are now with the people you're dealing with? Because I got to expect they're the kind of people who are sometimes experience really highs and big lows too.
Yeah, very, very much so. And I'm finding this across the board. So there's 2 main communities and groups that I'm working with. One is for coaches. We have a coaches community called the LXG, the Legion of Extraordinary Game Changers. And these are coaches that have been in the business for a while. They're 100K a year or more, some of them much more. And what I found is that by, again, use this word gamify, by gamifying their marketing, their selling, their service, and the long-term value of their relationship with these clients, we can reduce even the craziest amount of overwhelm and complexity into a actually entertaining, bite-sized, manageable game that they can win every single day. And man, it's just such a joy to work with these folks. We do Mindset Monday, Wisdom Wednesday. Once a month, we do Freedom Friday. And it's kind of conversations like this. And
Yeah.
just watching the obstacles just fall as a result of applying, frameworks and having a community that has accepted radical responsibility for their results. But on the other end of the spectrum, we've got a local community here in Austin that we had our fourth meeting. I think we've got like 60 members now.
Nice.
And this is completely dedicated to gamifying liberty. And so there is some overlap here that I think your listeners will dig. So about a month and a half ago, I got really down the rabbit hole of doing business in the private realm. And, if you whip out $100 bill and you look on it, or any fiat currency, it says this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private.
Yep.
So it says there right on the cash,
Correct.
there is public realm and there's a private realm. There are two jurisdictions in the United States. There is the federal jurisdiction, which is District of Columbia, which is it's basically like a homeowners association. And then there's the physical jurisdiction, the physical space of this land. And so if you're born in the United States, you are an American citizen. And then at birth, anybody born after 1933 has a corporation that is created that conveniently has the exact same name that they do. It's just in the all caps letter. And some people refer to this as the straw man. And that is the corporation for which you are the guarantor, and you are now doing business with the federal government. And so every offer of contract that's made, whether it's taxes, speeding tickets, any sort of fines
Licenses
or
of any
infractions,
kind.
exactly, licenses of any kind are all in the public realm in the federal territory. But here's what's cool. And I'll give you a practical example. Texas has 254 counties. Austin is in Travis County, et cetera. 46 of those counties are dry counties. So they don't serve alcohol, or at least it's not legal to serve alcohol. And yet there are bars and restaurants that are operating full swing. They've got a thriving business with amazing clientele. How do they do that? Well, what they do is they form a private member association, basically a private drinking club, and you sign a contract, and you are now doing business with the proprietor as individuals, as natural living beings operating in the private realm. And so then what the owner of the bar or the restaurant does is just drives to the neighboring county, goes to Costco, loads up on alcohol, drives back to their place, opens up, and just does business with their members. And the so-called
like a country club,
authorities,
right? I mean, similar things happen with country clubs and other, and
dude,
private
there's so many exempt, dude. I've been geeking out on this like crazy. A lot of people saw the movie Dallas Buyers Club with Matthew McConaughey about, this AIDS patient. That was a private medical association, private member association. He says it in the movie. I'm not selling medicine. I'm selling memberships. And so I just totally geeked out on this, put in a couple dozen hours of study and research and realized, wow, you can actually do this. And it's in the Constitution, First, Fifth, I think 13th Amendment. Congress shall make no law prohibiting or interfering with the right to contract. And so if you and I, let's say you've got a product and I want to join your business or I want to be a customer, then the first thing I would do is sign a membership contract, which keeps our dealings in private realm. And so that means we agree that whatever disputes we have, we're going to handle between us. That keeps us non-statutory compliant, which sounds awful and scary to some people. Actually, the most wonderful, liberating thing in the world.
Right.
So anyway, long story short, I realized I'm going to do this. I'm going to set up a private member association. So we've got our articles of association, we have our core principles, and we have a membership contract. And it's a ministry and lawfully defined as a faith-based organization. And the legal definition of faith, I think you'll appreciate this. The legal definition of faith is any strongly held belief, of which I have few, you have a few. So you can operate a faith-based organization with articles of association. It is unincorporated. It stays in the private realm. And so this ministry that I created, it's called Mosaic, which stands for the ministry of self-authorized interdependent communities. So
I love that.
people come in, they sign a membership contract and they're
Yeah.
in. And, for the whopping investment of $0, they are now a member in this private faith-based organization. And so as long as they, abide by these core principles, which are pretty comprehensive, but also, very psychographically targeted, like we know who we want in this organization.
Yep.
Then the next thing they do is I've created a self-scoring test using Maslow's supposed hierarchy. I don't think he actually came up with it, but using Maslow's hierarchy of safety, security, food, energy, shelter, social connections, creativity, self-actualization. And we've created basically a game where the goal is to be completely interdependently self-reliant. And so the shorthand for this is, how many corporations do you rely on? And the more corporations you rely on, the lower your score is. And so I'll give you an example right now. And while we're on this podcast, actually, Darren, who's the head operator at Freedom Farms, he just brought in a whole bunch of, I'll have to show you something. He just brought back a whole bunch of melons, like another 200 pounds of freshly processed pork. And so my goal, I actually have to send you some. If you send Helen your address, I'll send you some.
Yeah, love to, man.
Freedom Farms bacon.
Thank you. I won't turn down bacon.
So my goal is to get to 10 out of 10 on my food freedom, which means I am not reliant on any corporation. I'm not reliant on the store. I'm not reliant on supply chains, not out of fear of, what if something happens? It really just quality of life. If I know
sustainability and quality of life. Absolutely. Which we've been working on this, as you and I discussed a little bit too, through removal of major corporations for our exchange, like our animals and beef and other things. We buy third party, we exchange around community here. And some things we get from companies, but some things we don't. And we're trying to work towards more of that from just self-sustainability. So I relate to this conversation, and I'm sure somebody listening to this does.
You're living it. And so let's say you go through this mosaic freedom analysis, and let's say you're getting 20% of your family's nutrition from your garden, your farm, or people that you know and have a personal relationship with that's based on mutual value exchange. And so your score is like 2 out of 10 if you're getting 20% of your family's nutrition. So then to gamify it, we'd look at what can we do to get Neil's family from 2 to 3, and from 3 to 4, and 4 to 5, all the way up to 10, so that you are completely operating interdependently. And then we just do the exact same thing. We do the same thing with energy. I've got this plan to have a local solar farm. So people that want to set up solar panels and then just run their own charging service. So you bring a deep cycle battery, plug it in, it charges, and you take one that's fully charged and then just have it on an app. It can be run on a private mesh network. So when your battery gets down to 20%, the solar farmer gets the notice. And just imagine somebody on, like in a pickup truck, just cruising around the neighborhood, swapping people's batteries out. So
you're not like a milk truck.
Dude, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is.
I love it.
You're doing that, and you're a solar farmer, and you're taking on the responsibility and the investment for these panels, and you're delivering power to people's place.
You have a membership service for the power.
Exactly. And then maybe you're getting paid in eggs. Maybe you're getting paid in chicken. Maybe, here's where it really gets fun. Maybe you're a single mom and you don't have, tremendous ability to protect yourself and your kids. Most people will rely on, the cops and all of that. I actually had a recent example. I won't get into it here, but I had a recent example where I walked into my home. This is here in this new place. I walked into my home. As soon as I'm opening the door, my spider sense starts tingling. Sure enough, I open my door and there's a guy standing in my hallway pointing a pistol at me.
Nice.
And he says, "Don't make me shoot you."
This happened recently?
A week ago, last Tuesday.
Dude. Well, you're still here, so this obviously ends good in the story.
Well, it turns out, this is, there's been this sort of rise in home burglaries and all this stuff.
Oh, there has been kidnappings and other stuff. I know that. I've watched a couple of recent videos of a lady who literally tried to get pulled in a Walmart parking lot in broad daylight in Palmdale, Florida.
It's just going to happen more and more.
Just incredible.
In my case, I didn't have anybody else to be concerned about. So my choice was simple: create as much distance as I can between this pistol and me.
Yep.
So I just completely got out of there. By the time I got back to the house, oh, this is what made me think of the story. After I created some distance and I called 911, 911 rang for 90 seconds. Like nobody picked up.
What? You could have been shot a couple times over by that point
Easily.
easily.
Easily. So everything ended up about as good as can be. Nothing of huge value was taken. Nobody
He
was
must have
hurt.
ran after you caught you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I am very appreciative that he had a gun and I didn't, because if he hadn't had a gun, I would have responded most likely with force, and you can't
Yep.
undo that.
That's
If
hard.
I'd been
Yeah.
carrying in that moment, there would have most likely been a shootout, and you can't undo that. So all things being equal, I just got to be in really deep prayer that night and really feel compassion for this guy. Like, I don't know what's going on in his life that caused him to think that that was a good idea, but I hope
Yeah.
that he's okay. And
Bad
I
idea.
hope that things work out. The whole reason I bring that up is because if going back to this single mom in this scenario, if she's running a solar farm or she's running a garden and it's got surplus, and then there's a couple of guys who are ex special forces who want to add their very unique skill set to this local community and just run nice and friendly patrols.
Checkups.
Well,
Yeah. Trolls.
yeah, then she can go into their network of patrolled places, give food at an agreed upon level. They will add her house to the rotation. Their food score just went up and her security score just went up.
So you're building community at the simplest
I think
term,
that's
right?
what it's called. Yep.
I believe it's called community. Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
foreign word. Some of you
Crazy
might,
idea.
yeah,
Crazy.
some of you might look it up in the dictionary and see what it actually means to have
Yep.
community, because there are needs that everybody has, even
Right.
us, right?
Right.
I'm not solar independent right now, but hopefully I will be soon as I kind of work through some of these things on my own. But I love the concepts of sharing, of course, swapping, bartering, and trade, as we've done it around here by using the local farmers. I mean, our community, as I mentioned before, has got Amish and Mennonites all around us. So from trade to service to barter to opportunities for food and chickens and ducks and goats and, cows, and being able to do all that is one of the localized things.
And high
I'm not
quality,
quite,
high quality furniture.
and high quality furniture. Yes. And some really good butter.
Yes.
If you've ever had, although I can't eat dairy, but hey, it's really good from what I hear. And they make these really great jams. But there's just a quality of connectivity, which I love in this area. Now, what if I'm living in a community? What if I'm living in the city and I'm listening to this going, okay, the HOA thing struck me a second ago and I laughed because what a stupid analogy, not you, but the analogy of a homeowner in equivalency of an association that has to do with our government. I just chuckled to myself because I ran into the HOAs in the past and how dumb that idiocracy is when you are literally able to be picked on by the HOA because they don't like something about you. In my case, it was my trash can was not in the right place.
Right.
And then it became a personal vengeance of who's got the, biggest ego here as to whether or not they could force me to put my trash can where they wanted in the HOA and not do that to my neighbors. Literally the guy whose trash can was 20 feet from me, they were giving me tickets and notices on the lawyers and his was sitting right across from it. And I'm like, hey, did you get a ticket from the HOA for like a lawyer fee or something? And he's like, no. I'm like, what the heck?
Yep.
So, there's that sort of nonsense, but the government does that to us too, which is where the laughter of myself.
Well, and you said a really key point there. The government does this to us, or the homeowners does this to us. We actually do it to ourselves by unwittingly, unknowingly entering into contracts or by refusing to refute the contract.
I enable them to do it to me in essence.
Right. Well, it happens to everybody, it's like you enter into a contract, not really reading the terms and conditions. And that's what makes this whole private business, private member association, private medical association, private education association.
Yes.
That's what makes all this so exciting, because
very much
you are not operating in the public realm except when it suits you, like Neo going into the Matrix to learn Kung Fu and then coming back out into the real world. Right. So I'm really fired up about this, about Mosaic and the idea of open sourcing all of the legal knowledge, all of the blueprints, all of the templates that somebody can just, as Gary Halbert would say, can and clone, and have all of these just absolute pop-up tribes that are operating in the private realm, doing business between, trusted friends and members. But to your point about somebody who's living in a city, you can start with wherever you're at. Because this is not a, push button, one click. Okay, now I'm
No, it takes
It's
them
like,
time to build community and the
yeah,
relationships and the
yeah,
services and the people and the skill sets
right,
of
right.
varying nature. Yeah.
Right. But I would say and we've got a great example of this with Mosaic. There's a guy that became one of our members, and he just told me, he said, man, I feel really vulnerable. Like I'm not growing food. I don't have,
Yep.
can't really defend myself, all this stuff. And he said, but I am a programmer and I have written software for a living for, the last 20 years. I'm like, dude, that's massively valuable. So, we're coming in to this organization and he's going to custom write the code that is going to give us this networked community that is completely operating privately. And so that's a massive value. And in exchange, the dude's going to have chickens and bacon and watermelon and, all of that for days. So like whatever your skill set is, if this is something you want to be a part of, find the people that are also interested. And I'm always happy to share whatever we're doing. We do live streams for these Sovereign Sundays. And, we have people who don't live in Austin, but they're tuning in and they're getting
Yeah.
caught up to speed on all this stuff. So there's a
It's
lot
great
of
stuff,
resources
man.
out there.
No, it's great stuff. And just like every conversation we have, it's all of a sudden 30 minutes to an hour. So we could go on for a long time. I'm going to stop us here because there's a lot to unpack with what we talked about today. But I think the core component I took, and hopefully everyone listening did too, build a community. I mean, that is really in essence. And I love the way your framework and Mosaic is coming together. I love the way you're building the sustainability, matching people with skill sets at different levels of opportunity. That's amazing. And it is what community driven lifestyles really look like. I can tell you from my own personal benefits, you should really do this from many areas of just personal fulfillment to self-sustainability to off-grid in some capacity of feeling like you can withstand, a shift in culture or environment within our country that does not dramatically impact your family and make you a victim. Getting into the community situation is a big thing of moving from scarcity to abundance in your mindset. And there's not a better person I can speak to than you about that, Jesse. And I want to thank you so much for coming on and speaking out today with everybody into their lives. And I appreciate it very much.
My pleasure. Round 3 coming soon.
Round 3 coming soon. Thanks, brother.
Thank you, man.
If you like this episode, please share it with people you think will enjoy it as well. Thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in next week for a brand new episode of High Voltage Business Builders.